Millionaire kissed a homeless girl to escape marriage, but her secret changed his life forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The grand ballroom of the Cole estate glittered beneath 1,000 chandeliers. Reporters crowded near the velvet ropes, their cameras flashing like lightning in a summer storm. In the center of it all stood Ethan Cole, the young millionaire heir to the Cole empire, tall, composed, and suffocating behind a perfect smile. Tonight was supposed to be his engagement party, a merger dressed as a wedding. The woman beside him, Vanessa Green, the daughter of his father's oldest business partner, looked radiant in a silver gown. Ethan's father stood nearby, watching closely, as if every move were a chess piece in a billion-dollar game. Ethan's chest felt tight beneath his tailored suit. The music swelled, and he caught his reflection in a mirror, handsome, successful, and completely trapped. His father's voice echoed in his mind. Marriage is business. Emotions have no place here. But all Ethan could think was how desperately he wanted to breathe. He stepped away from the crowd, slipping through a side door into the cool night air. The marble steps led down to the street where rain had just begun to fall. That was when he saw her. A young woman stood by the iron gate, shivering beneath a broken street lamp. Her coat was torn, her hair damp from the drizzle. A cardboard sign leaned beside her duffel bag. Just need a second chance. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Hers were tired yet defiant, a spark of pride buried under exhaustion. Inside, voices were calling his name, impatient, demanding. The reporters were waiting for his return, for the announcement, for the photograph that would seal his family's next deal. And suddenly, something in him broke. Ethan walked straight toward the girl. She flinched as he approached, confusion flashing in her eyes. Before she could speak, he took her hand, whispering, "Please, just trust me." Then, without hesitation, he pulled her close and kissed her. Gasps erupted behind them. Camera flashes exploded through the rain. Reporters rushed forward, shouting questions. "Who is she? Mr. Cole, is this your fiancé?" Ethan did not answer. He simply looked at her, this stranger with storm-wet hair, and for the first time in years, he felt alive. When he finally released her, she stared at him, stunned. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Saving myself," he said quietly. Within hours, the tabloids exploded. Millionaire kisses homeless girl to avoid arranged marriage. Ethan Cole's reckless act became headline news across the country. The next morning, in a quiet downtown cafe, the girl from the gate sat by the window with a steaming cup of black coffee. Her name was Lena Rivers, and life had taught her to stay invisible. But there she was, front page of every newspaper. When Ethan walked in, dressed in a dark coat and sunglasses, she nearly spilled her coffee. "You?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He removed his glasses, his expression calm but tired. "Actually," he said, "I do, and I need your help to fix it." Lena laughed bitterly. "You ruined my life and now you need my help?" "I ruined my own too," Ethan replied. "But I can make it worth your while." He slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside was a legal contract with her name already typed on it. "Pretend to be my fiancé for 1 month," he said. "After that, you get a home, a job, and enough money to start over. All you have to do is play along." Lena stared at him, the paper trembling in her hands. "Why me?" Ethan's gaze softened. "Because you are the only person in that moment who did not want anything from me." Outside, the rain eased. Inside, 2 lives, one gilded, one shattered, were about to collide under a lie that would change them both forever. The cafe stayed quiet long after Ethan left. Lena sat frozen at the table, staring at the contract he had left behind. The paper was heavy, crisp, embossed with gold lettering that spelled out Cole Industries' Legal Affairs Division. Her reflection trembled in the coffee's surface. A millionaire had just asked her, a girl who slept behind a gas station last month, to pretend to be his fiancé. That night, she sat on a park bench under a broken streetlight and read every line of the document again. The offer was outrageous, but it was also real. 30 days, a private apartment, a new wardrobe, $50,000 at the end. It sounded like a dream or a trap. She thought of her mother's voice from years ago, saying, Do not sell your soul, Lena, not even for a miracle. But she also remembered the cold, the hunger, the way people looked through her as if she were invisible. The next morning, a black car stopped near the park. The driver stepped out, polite but distant. "Miss Rivers, Mr. Cole is expecting you." Lena hesitated, then climbed in. Manhattan flashed by in silver and glass. They pulled up before a modern high-rise overlooking Central Park. Security guards nodded as she passed, their eyes curious but respectful. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan stood waiting, wearing the same calm expression that drove her crazy. "Good morning," he said. "I am glad you came." "I did not say yes yet," she replied. He gestured toward the view beyond the glass wall. The city stretched endlessly below them. "You do not have to decide now. Just see what you are saying no to." Inside, an assistant presented her with a wardrobe of elegant clothes, each tagged with her name. A stylist offered to cut her hair. Lena shook her head. "No scissors," she said quietly. "Not yet." Ethan noticed the way she gripped the strap of her old bag, the same one she had carried when he first saw her. After lunch, he brought out the contract again. "You can walk away right now. I will make sure the press forgets your name. Or you can stay for 30 days and help me stop a marriage that should never happen." Lena looked up at him. "What makes you think I can help you?" "Because you are not afraid of me," he said simply. Her pulse quickened. There was no arrogance in his voice, only exhaustion. She studied him for a long time, then signed her name. The following days blurred into a strange rhythm of transformation. A team of stylists taught her how to walk in heels, how to hold a champagne glass, how to greet investors without flinching. Cameras followed them everywhere. Ethan played the role of the perfect fiancé, his hand on her back, his smile steady, but behind every photograph, his eyes told a different story. At first, Lena stumbled through every event. She spilled coffee on a silk tablecloth during a breakfast meeting, bowed at the wrong time at a charity gala, and forgot which fork to use at dinner. Yet, somehow, her unpolished honesty began to charm people. When an elderly board member asked where she had studied, she said without hesitation, "I studied survival." The man laughed, and so did half the table. Ethan noticed. Each night, when the lights dimmed and the city fell quiet, he found himself thinking of her laugh echoing through the marble halls. It was unguarded, real, something his world had long forgotten. One evening, he invited her to the rooftop terrace. The wind carried the scent of rain and distant traffic. She leaned against the railing, the city's glow painting her face in gold. "You know," she said softly, "this all feels like a play. You pretending to love me pretending to belong here." "Maybe it is," Ethan said, standing beside her. "But every story has a way of becoming real when people start believing in it." For a long moment, neither spoke. The world below seemed far away, a blur of lights and secrets. Then Lena turned to him and asked, "What happens when the 30 days are over?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then the deal ends," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. When she went inside, he stayed behind, staring at the skyline that had once meant power and now felt like a cage. He did not know why he cared if she stayed or left. All he knew was that the lie that started as an escape was slowly becoming the only truth he wanted to keep. Across the city, headlines still buzzed with speculation. But inside that penthouse, something quieter was beginning, a fragile connection, born not from money or status, but from two people pretending so hard that they forgot where the act ended and the feeling began. By the end of the first week, Lena had become a reluctant celebrity. Her photograph appeared on magazine covers beside headlines that read, "Mystery Fiancé of Ethan Cole. Who is she really?" She tried to ignore them, but every time she stepped outside, flashing cameras reminded her of how fragile this arrangement was. Ethan remained calm through the chaos. His control over every situation was infuriating. Whenever reporters shouted questions, he would rest a hand lightly on her back, guide her forward, and answer with effortless charm. "No comment," he would say, smiling for the cameras. The world saw a couple perfectly in love. Only Lena knew the silence that followed once the doors closed. That evening, a team from a fashion magazine arrived for an interview. Ethan's assistant arranged the living room, filled it with flowers, and whispered the pre-written answers Lena was expected to say. "Remember," the assistant murmured, "you met at a charity auction. You shared a love for classical art. You both believe in second chances." Lena nodded but said nothing. When the camera lights came on, she smiled, elegant and poised. But when the interviewer asked, "Lena, how did a girl like you capture a millionaire's heart?" she paused. Her smile faltered. Then she said quietly, "Maybe it was not about capturing anything. Maybe it was about being seen for once." The room fell silent. Even the interviewer stopped writing. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. Later that night, after the crew left, he found her sitting alone on the balcony, legs tucked under the chair, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You did well today," he said. She shook her head. "I told the truth. That was not part of your plan." He leaned on the railing beside her. "Maybe I am tired of plans." The city stretched below them, endless and glittering. Lena looked up at him. "You know, Ethan, people think money gives you power. But watching you, I think it just builds higher walls." For once, he had no clever reply. He only asked, "And what about you, Lena? What are you hiding behind yours?" Her eyes flickered toward the skyline. "A fire," she said softly. "One that took everything I loved." He turned toward her, confused. But before he could ask more, his phone buzzed. It was his father. The message read, "Dinner tomorrow. Bring her. Time to prove she is worth the Cole name." No. The next evening, the air in the Cole mansion was thick with tension. The dining room glittered with crystal and candlelight, but the warmth was cold and calculated. Ethan's father sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his expression sharp as glass. Beside him was Vanessa Green, the woman Ethan had once been forced to marry. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were filled with quiet victory. "So," his father began, his tone heavy, "this is the woman who replaced a Green." "No." Lena straightened in her seat, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "My name is Lena Rivers, sir." "A charming name," he said dryly. "Do you know how to hold a fork properly, Miss Rivers?" The room went still. Ethan's jaw tightened. But before he could speak, Lena calmly picked up her fork, perfectly poised. "Like this?" she said, her voice steady. The faintest curve of a smile touched her lips. "Do not worry, Mr. Cole. I learn quickly." "Oh." The old man's eyes narrowed, but a few of the board members seated nearby stifled small grins. Vanessa's face flushed. The rest of the dinner passed in uneasy silence, broken only by the clink of silverware. When they left the mansion, Ethan held the car door open without a word. As soon as it closed, he exhaled. "You handled that better than most executives I know," she shrugged. "I have dealt with worse. Street people do not care what fork you use." He glanced at her, admiration flickering behind his usual restraint. "You are something else, Lena." She smiled faintly. "You mean I am trouble?" He looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Maybe that is exactly what I need." That night, she found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling of the penthouse guest room. She kept thinking about his words, his father's cruel smirk, and the way her chest had tightened when Ethan defended her. She told herself it was only gratitude, nothing more. But deep down, something was changing, something she could not control. Across the hall, Ethan sat in his study, unable to focus on the financial reports glowing on his laptop. Every number blurred into Lena's face at that dinner table, calm, brave, defiant. He had seen hundreds of people bow to his father's power, but she had not. She had simply been herself. And somehow, that simple act had shaken him more than any hostile takeover ever could. As the night deepened, both of them lay awake in separate rooms, unaware that the line between their contract and their hearts was already beginning to blur. The days that followed the dinner at the Cole mansion moved like a quiet storm. Something unspoken had shifted between Ethan and Lena. Their contract still hung between them, crisp and formal on paper, but every shared glance and unfinished sentence made it feel less like an agreement and more like a fragile promise neither dared to define. One morning, Ethan found Lena in the library, seated by the tall windows that overlooked the city. She was wearing a soft cream sweater, her hair tied loosely, a cup of tea cooling beside her. "You have been up early," he said, stepping closer. "I could not sleep," she replied. "I keep wondering what happens when all of this ends." Ethan hesitated, his hand resting on the back of the chair opposite her. "Then you will take what is yours. The payment, the new start. You will leave this behind." She met his eyes. "And you?" He looked away. "I will go back to pretending." There was a sadness in his tone that made her chest tighten. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He frowned, glancing at the screen. "I have to go to the company board meeting," It will not take long. That afternoon, while Ethan faced a room full of executives, Lena wandered through the penthouse. She stopped by the study, where the walls were lined with framed photographs, his mother, long gone, smiling beside a much younger Ethan. A warmth filled her chest. He was not just a millionaire. He was a son who had once been loved before success swallowed him whole. When he returned that evening, his suit jacket hung loose, his face drawn. "Rough meeting?" she asked. "Rough day," he admitted. "They want proof that our engagement is real. They are hosting a charity gala this weekend. We have to attend together." "Of course," she said softly. "It is part of the deal." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "You keep saying that, but lately, I am not sure what is part of the deal anymore." That weekend, the ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria shimmered with chandeliers and champagne. Ethan and Lena entered hand in hand, cameras flashing, murmurs spreading through the crowd. She wore a deep emerald dress that shimmered like the city lights. He looked at her as if the entire room had vanished. Reporters swarmed, but Ethan stayed close, his voice low and reassuring. "Just smile, nod, and let them talk," he whispered. She did exactly that, her grace quiet but magnetic. Even the most skeptical guests found themselves drawn to her presence. Midway through the evening, a journalist cornered them with a sharp smile. "Miss Rivers, how does it feel to transform from the streets to high society overnight? Do you really think love can bridge that gap?" The words cut deep, but Lena's expression remained steady. "Love is not about where you start," she said. "It is about what you choose to believe when no one else does." The journalist blinked, caught off guard. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, pride flickering in his eyes. When the music began, Ethan extended his hand toward her. "Dance with me," he said. She hesitated. "I do not dance." "Neither do I," he replied with a smile. He led her onto the floor, the orchestra swelling around them. Their steps were unsure at first, but soon they found a rhythm that felt like breathing. The lights softened, the noise faded, and for a fleeting moment, the world shrank to the sound of their hearts. As the final note hung in the air, the crowd applauded. Cameras flashed again, but Ethan did not care. He looked at Lena, at the faint flush on her cheeks, and said quietly, "Thank you for saving me from myself." Later that night, back at the penthouse, Lena stood by the window, the city glittering below. Ethan joined her, still wearing his tie loosely undone. "You were incredible tonight," he said. "So were you," she answered. "You almost looked happy." He laughed softly. "Maybe I was." "No." For a moment, silence settled between them, comfortable and electric. Then Lena whispered, "Ethan, what if this stops being pretend?" He turned toward her. The question hung between them like a fragile thread. He wanted to say that it already had, that the act had become something real long ago. But before he could speak, his phone rang again. His father's name flashed across the screen. Ethan let it ring. Outside, thunder rolled across the city skyline. Inside, two people who had once built their worlds on lies were beginning to realize that the truth, no matter how terrifying, was already taking root in their hearts. In that moment, neither of them knew that the storm had only begun. The storm that began that night did not stop with thunder. By morning, it had become something else entirely, a storm of headlines, rumors, and betrayal. Ethan woke to the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. His assistant's voice came through in panic. "Sir, someone leaked Lena's background. The tabloids have everything her past shelters, old arrest for trespassing, even medical records from the fire. It is everywhere." He sat up sharply, disbelief flashing across his face. "That is impossible. No one here had access to that information." "Someone did," the assistant replied quietly. "And the board is furious. They want a statement before noon." Across the hall, Lena stood frozen before the television. Her photograph filled the screen, surrounded by cruel headlines. "From streets to scandal, Ethan Cole's fake fiancé exposed." Her hands trembled as she reached for the remote, turning the volume down, but the voices of the reporters seemed to echo inside her head. When Ethan found her, she was still standing there, pale and silent. "Lena, listen to me." She cut him off, her voice breaking. "Did you know they were digging into me?" "No." "I swear I had no idea." "No." She looked at him, eyes wide with hurt. "Then why does it feel like you did nothing to stop it?" He stepped closer, but she stepped back. "You promised this was pretend, Ethan, that no one would get hurt." "I will fix this," he said, his voice shaking with conviction. "I will shut it down." But before he could say more, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a reporter offering money for an exclusive interview. Beneath it, another message appeared from Vanessa Green. "You should have stayed where you belonged." Lena stared at the screen, realization dawning. Vanessa had been at every event, every photo opportunity, smiling sweetly while plotting the perfect revenge. Without another word, Lena grabbed her coat. Ethan tried to stop her, but she brushed past him. "You cannot fix this, Ethan. Not with money. Not this time." She left the penthouse as rain began to fall again, the same kind of cold, relentless rain that had brought them together. Hours later, Ethan stood before the board of directors. The meeting room was filled with hostility. His father sat at the head of the table, the newspaper spread open before him. "You have humiliated this company," the old man said. "The investors are pulling back. End this nonsense immediately." Ethan's jaw tightened. "No. I will not throw her to the wolves just to protect your empire." "This is not about morality," his father snapped. "It is about survival." Ethan leaned forward. "Then maybe this empire is not worth surviving." He walked out before anyone could reply. That night, he searched every street, every shelter, every coffee shop where she might have gone. The rain blurred the city lights, soaking through his coat. He finally found her near the old church steps, sitting under the awning, clutching a small photograph burned around the edges. "Lena," he said softly. She looked up. "How did you find me?" "I remembered what you said about the fire," he answered. "You come here every year, do you not?" She looked down at the photo. "It was my mother's. She died trying to save me. The fire was not an accident. It was from a construction site built by Coal Industries, your company." The words hit him like a blow. He stared at her, speechless. I did not know." "I know you did not," she said quietly. "But your father did." For a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence between them. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document, their contract, now worn and smudged. He held it out to her. "This means nothing anymore. I am ending it. You deserve better than a paper promise." Lena looked at the contract, then at him. "And what about you? What happens when you lose everything?" He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I finally have a chance to start over like you once did." "No?" She stood slowly, her eyes softening. "You cannot undo the past, Ethan." "No," he said, taking her hand. "But maybe we can rewrite what comes next." For the first time since the storm began, she let him hold her. The city around them blurred into streaks of gold and silver, and somewhere behind the clouds, the rain began to ease. Neither of them noticed the photographer across the street, camera in hand, capturing the moment. By morning, a new headline would appear. Ethan Cole defends his fiancée, against his own father love over legacy. But for that night, none of it mattered. The contract, the cameras, the empire, everything faded, leaving only two people standing in the rain, no longer pretending. By the next morning, Ethan Cole's world was on fire. News outlets replayed the same footage again and again. Ethan walking through the rain, hand in hand with Lena Rivers, refusing to deny their relationship. For the first time, he did not hide behind silence or press statements. He simply looked into the camera and said, "She is the only truth I have left." The city erupted. Half the country called it a love story. The other half called it a scandal. Investors panicked. Coal Industries stock fell by 10% overnight. Inside the marble office tower that bore his family's name, tension hung thick as fog. Ethan's father summoned him immediately. When Ethan entered the boardroom, every face turned toward him. The old man stood at the head of the table, a newspaper crumpled in his fist. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" he thundered. "You have destroyed our name, our reputation, everything your mother and I built." Ethan met his father's fury with quiet resolve. "No, father, I am saving it. You built this company on power and fear. I want to rebuild it on something real." The room fell silent. One of the younger board members shifted uncomfortably. Another whispered, "He is serious." Ethan set a file on the table. "The Coal Foundation will be separate from the corporation. I will resign as CEO and redirect my shares to fund community projects, the same kind of shelters Lena once lived in. We have caused enough damage. It is time to give something back." His father's face went pale. "You would throw away everything for that girl?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I am not throwing it away. I am finally doing something that would make Mother proud." The old man's anger faded into disbelief. "If you walk out of here now, you are no longer my son." Ethan turned toward the door. "Then I guess this is goodbye." That evening, Lena found him sitting on the steps outside the foundation's old building, his suit jacket folded beside him, his hair damp from the drizzle. He looked exhausted, but lighter somehow. "You did it," she said softly. "You actually walked away." "No." He gave a faint smile. "It feels strange, like breathing for the first time." She sat beside him. "What happens now?" He looked out at the dark street. "Now, we build something new. Together, if you will stay." Lena studied him for a moment. "Ethan, I do not belong in your world." "Then I will come to yours," he said simply. Her heart ached at the honesty in his voice. For the first time, she saw the man behind the headlines, not the billionaire, not the scandal, but a human being stripped of all armor. The next few weeks passed quietly. The media storm slowly began to fade as another story took its place. Ethan sold his penthouse and moved into a modest apartment near the new foundation headquarters. Lena helped him organize the first project, a housing initiative for single mothers and fire victims. Each day was filled with phone calls, meetings, and laughter that felt real. One afternoon, as they reviewed blueprints, Lena found herself staring at Ethan's handwriting across the table. He was focused, sleeves rolled up, eyes bright. When he looked up and caught her staring, she blushed and pretended to read the notes. "What is it?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just wondering when you learned to listen instead of command." He chuckled. "Around the time I met a woman who told me money builds higher walls." She smiled softly. "And you decided to tear them down." He leaned back in his chair. "With your help." That night, after the office emptied, Ethan and Lena stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking the glowing skyline. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic below. He turned to her, his voice quiet. "Lena, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If you could go back before the kiss, before the contract, would you still say yes?" Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "I do not know. Maybe I would have run away." "Why?" he asked. "Because I did not believe someone like you could ever mean it." Ethan stepped closer. "And now?" She met his gaze. "Now, I am starting to." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the air between them heavy with things neither dared to say. Then slowly, Ethan reached for her hand. The city stretched before them like a living heartbeat, and for the first time, he did not feel alone. Below them, the lights of Cole Tower still glimmered, but Ethan no longer belonged to that world. He belonged here beside the woman who had shown him that love was not something you could buy or sign into existence. It had to be earned, one choice, one truth, one heartbeat at a time. And though their story had begun as an illusion, both of them knew now that what had grown between them was the most real thing either had ever found. The peace did not last long. 2 months after Ethan's resignation, trouble came quietly but hit like a wave. One morning, Lena entered the new foundation office and found him standing by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression hard. When he hung up, his shoulders were tense. "It is my father," he said flatly. "He is filing a lawsuit against me. He claims I stole corporate funds to start the foundation." Lena's heart sank. "That is not true. Everything was transferred legally." He nodded. "It does not matter. In his world, truth is what money can buy. He wants to destroy what we built." Within days, headlines screamed again. Ethan Cole accused of fraud. News anchors speculated about the foundation's legitimacy. Donations slowed, sponsors pulled out. The press waited outside the building, shouting questions that stung like stones. Lena tried to stay strong, helping the small team keep the doors open, but she could see the toll it took on Ethan. Late at night, he sat at his desk surrounded by stacks of paperwork, exhaustion darkening the circles under his eyes. "You do not have to fight this alone," she told him one evening. "I do," he said quietly. "It was my name that burned this place, and it will be my name that clears it." "No." She walked closer. "Ethan, people will believe what they want. You cannot change that." He looked up, his voice low. "Maybe not, but I can show them what truth looks like." The next day, Ethan held a press conference in front of the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones lined the steps. He stood before them, calm and steady. "The Cole Foundation was built on transparency and compassion," he said. If my father believes that is theft, then let the world see the difference between greed and grace. Lena watched from the crowd, her hands clasped tightly. For a brief moment, she saw the man he was always meant to be, not the billionaire's heir, but a leader guided by heart. That night, as the news aired his statement, public opinion began to shift. Former employees of coal industries came forward with evidence of the father's corruption. The truth spread faster than lies could keep up. When Ethan returned to the office, Lena was waiting. "You did it," she said, smiling through tears. He shook his head. "We did it." But their victory came with a cost. The old man suffered a heart attack shortly after the scandal broke. Ethan rushed to the hospital, guilt weighing heavy on him. When he reached the room, his father lay pale and frail, tubes running across his chest. The old man opened his eyes. "You proved your point," he rasped. Ethan swallowed hard. "I did not want this. I just wanted to make things right." His father's eyes softened, the anger gone. "Then do it better than I did." Those were his last words. When Ethan stepped out into the corridor, Lena was there. He did not speak. She simply took his hand, and he let her. The storm had passed, but in its wake, something quiet and permanent remained, a truth carved by loss and forgiveness. Ethan had lost his empire, but he had found something greater, the peace of living honestly, and the woman who had made it all possible. A week after the funeral, the air around the coal estate felt heavy and quiet. The media frenzy had faded, leaving behind the hollow echo of everything that had been lost. Ethan spent his days sorting through his father's files, returning calls from lawyers, and signing documents that closed one chapter of his life after another. Lena stayed close, helping where she could, but mostly just being there. Some nights she found him sitting in the dark, staring at the last photograph of his parents, his father proud, his mother gentle. He never said much, but she could see the grief in his silence. One evening, when he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. "I thought winning would feel like justice," he said, "but it just feels empty." Lena sat beside him. "Justice is not about feeling good, Ethan. It is about ending what is wrong so something new can begin." He turned toward her, a faint smile on his face. "You sound like the person I was supposed to become." A few days later, an envelope arrived from the family attorney. Inside was the last will of Richard Cole. To everyone's surprise, his father had left a letter addressed only to Ethan. It was short, handwritten in uneven lines. "Do what I could not. Build something that lasts, not in numbers, but in people. The company is yours again. Use it wisely." Ethan read the letter twice before setting it down. "He left everything to me," he said quietly. "Every share, every building." Lena looked at him carefully. "Then what will you do with it?" He hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Give it away." Within weeks, Ethan announced the merger of coal industries with the foundation. Every dollar of profit would go toward rebuilding communities destroyed by corporate neglect. News outlets called it the redemption of Ethan Cole. But for him, it was simply finishing what his father had started too late. One evening, the foundation held a small gathering to celebrate the reopening of the shelter Lena had once lived in. The new sign above the entrance read, "River's Home." She stood in front of it, tears catching the light. "You named it after me?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "It is where my story started. It should have your name." She turned to him, smiling through the tears. "You always find a way to surprise me." He looked at her for a long moment. "There is one more thing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a framed sheet of paper, their old contract, now yellowed and creased. He handed it to her. "I kept this," he said, "not as a reminder of what we pretended, but of what became real." At the bottom of the page, a new line had been written in his handwriting. Clause 5. Love. No expiration. Lie. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "You kept it all this time?" "I never stopped believing in it," he said. She reached for his hand. "Then maybe it is time we sign a new one without conditions." The crowd around them applauded softly as Ethan pulled her into his arms. The story that had begun with a reckless kiss had come full circle, no longer bound by secrets or contracts, but by choice. As the lights from the shelter glowed behind them, Lena whispered, "You finally built something that lasts." Ethan smiled, his voice warm against the night air. "We built it, together." For the first time, he felt his father's words settle into peace. Not wealth, not legacy, just love, and the quiet certainty that, at last, he had found home. 1 year later, Spring sunlight poured over New York City like liquid gold. The newly opened Rivers Foundation Center stood at the heart of downtown, filled with laughter, warm meals, and quiet hope. Volunteers moved through the halls, and the sound of children's footsteps echoed softly. Lena walked through the courtyard, a clipboard in her hand and a smile that reached her eyes. She paused near a mural on the wall, a painting of two hands reaching for each other through the rain. At the bottom were the words, "Kindness builds what power cannot." Behind her, Ethan approached, wearing a simple gray suit. The man who had once lived behind glass towers now carried himself with calm confidence, grounded in something deeper than status. "You did all this," he said gently. She turned to him. "We did this." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Then there is only one thing left." Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant and unpretentious. "This time," he said, his voice soft but sure, "no contracts, no secrets, no pretending, just truth." Lena's eyes shimmered. "Ethan, are you sure?" He smiled. "I have never been more certain of anything." She nodded, her voice trembling. "Then yes." The small crowd of staff and friends who had gathered nearby began to clap. A few of them wiped away tears as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. For a moment, the world stood still. The same man who had once kissed a stranger to escape a marriage of convenience was now choosing love freely, openly, and without fear. As they embraced, the sunlight caught on the framed contract displayed inside the lobby, a reminder of where everything had begun. The last line shimmered faintly in the light. Clause 5, love, no expiration. And for Ethan and Lena, that promise finally became real. Their story, born from a lie, had ended in truth, a love that needed no contract, no condition, and no end.